Superb. So yeah, thanks again to everyone who is here. This is the StakeWise Office Hours number 5 now, and we have a few topics to go through, mainly stuff around um, the closing of the Atlantic testnet, the preparations ahead of the new testnet release, as well as audits, and of course maybe some discussion around the recent tokenomics proposals that we have seen on the forum, as well as some community initiatives that have been put forward by no other than Shoque, who is also here in the call. So I guess we'll go over these one by one. At least this was my agenda, but in case we want to focus on certain things for longer, then let's just do that. Again, this is just it's an update on our side, but it's also like a two-way conversation that we want to have. So by all means, stop me and let's have a conversation. So I guess we could just start with the news around the Atlantic testnet finish. So we have now kind of unofficially closed it and have exited the validators. This has happened last week, and by then, Atlantic has been running for something like 3 months. So what have we really learned in the past 3 months with respect to our architecture? So first of all, I think we were able to identify some issues with the Vault setup in terms of what things could be simplified, how things could be run in parallel. Really just the UX and UI part of it that has now improved thanks to the feedback we received from over 30 participants. So that's one bit. Another, we have had the opportunity to just make the services, the software that operators need to run in order to connect their node to the smart contracts of their Vault. We've refined that and managed to improve it based on the feedback. I think we've had multiple PRs to optimize for it, and we're finally at the stage where everyone seems to be sort of appreciative of how stable it runs. In general, in terms of let's say the business development effort around people's participation, what we've managed to do with the closed testnet is gather over 30 participants that are very experienced operators, including some of the biggest ones in the space, which is definitely great because they bring a wealth of knowledge and also can give us feedback on the technical components. But what's perhaps even better is that we are already starting to see some of the initial applications for StakeWise V3 architecture in other products, and the Blockscape, in this regard, you may have seen the recent announcement, is a prime example. So you may have missed it, but as a reminder, Blockscape is a node operator company, and they will be launching their staking product oriented towards institutions based on StakeWise V3 architecture. And we certainly hope and work towards making them just the first ones among the big line of other participants and other organizations and individuals who use the architecture and smart contracts to launch their own staking products. It feels good that even coming out of the closed testnet, we already have kind of some initial reactions that are so positive. In general, I think it would be great to hear from you, Jordan, what was the reception of StakeWise V3 like at ETH Prague. I think it's been mentioned in the sort of testnet chat a couple of times that there were positive things that were said about StakeWise, but probably best to hear about that from you. But yeah, the testnet overall, just based on this feedback and based on some of the public announcement, has definitely been a success. And now with also the Vault contracts audited and the new set of audits, prepared, I think we are definitely more confident as a team that the Vault's sort of architecture was the right step for just the future of the StakeWise product. So that's as far as I can say on the Atlantic testnet. Jordan, would you be able to give us a few comments or maybe share some of the experiences you had of speaking with people about StakeWise V3 and in general modular staking at ETH Prague?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think it's like fair to say the feedback I've been getting in terms of the direction we're moving in as a project is just like overwhelmingly positive. Even new people who I'm explaining the product to on the first time round, they're suddenly intrigued with the design. They see it as novel, as something new and something that's much needed in the space. So I think it's overwhelming feedback, like positively feedback on that side. So I gave a talk about the modularity of staking on stage at Prague, and again that went well. I did a bit of comparisons with Lido and their V2 model, but I think it's fair to say our projects are very different, even though architecturally they look similar. I think in practice they are very, very different. And I think there's a recording of that talk if you want to go and have a look. But I think one of the main things for me is that we've been getting like some of the largest node operators that are out there right now, and like some of the most respected names in the space, who are on the testnet and who are saying very positive things. And like to me, that is like the main indicator that we're moving in the right direction. Like these guys are the most experienced in the space; they know what they're talking about, and so and they've also had experience operating not just on just for themselves as large commercial node operators, but also as part of other staking protocols in the space as well. So they're very much involved and getting positive feedback, and also hearing. And how to put this? It's not just direct feedback from these node operators directly to me, but also hearing the node operators and the people in the space talking to each other about it. Like there's already some large commercial node operators who are planning to group together and create their own staking solutions with V3. So like overall, it's just very positive to hear these respected guys in the space getting involved and looking to actually like leverage the product we're building. So it's super valuable to hear that.
Thank you. Yeah, great to hear it. But again, I think it's worth emphasizing that we're still at the testnet stage, and it's best to judge the success of StakeWise and the results of our work when we actually see all these guys with us on mainnet. So I guess we just collectively need to stay tuned for that. And I mean, on our end, we'll do our utmost to make sure that more organizations and more people use V3 for their staking needs. Moving on, I think the next topic that we had for the discussion is really the public testnet readiness. And this is actually a part of the conversation where we want to have a focus on solo stakers and individual stakers, just on top of the commercial operators that have been involved in the closed testnet at first. So for the public testnet, we basically, I think, are more or less ready with the UI. We are more or less ready with the smart contracts. Like I mentioned before, some custom functionality is being developed on the side, but at least the core functionality is ready. And we can't wait to test it out together with you guys and the other participants. There is like we mentioned, this piece of software that we call NodeWise, which is supposed to help people operate nodes from home. It's a graphical user interface that automates as much as possible on the node running side and simplifies the whole thing down to pressing a few buttons. Compared to some of the other software available in the space, there is like the major difference is that NodeWise is not tied to any particular machine. As long as you meet the requirements on CPU, RAM, SSD, network speed, you should be able to run this on any operating software. And so, operating system. And so what we're now doing is making sure that we test as many different combinations of machines as possible before testnet release to really present NodeWise in a very, very strong MVP stage. So yeah, this is something that is I guess our focus in this last sort of run up to the public testnet release. We also are working on the documentation because naturally, in order for people to participate as either stakers or vault operators, we want to have information available at their fingertips. So the docs are being refreshed. We also obviously working on the updated scope within the light paper, and we'll share, let's say, the summary of these updates compared to what we originally believed to be the scope for release compared to what we now see. Sort of a spoiler, not much has changed in terms of the overall effect, but there are certain mechanics that we had to change just based on either flawed logic in our original assessment or something like an improved design that we managed to come up with. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that just based on the fact that we finalized the Atlantic testnet, we are really nearing the moment when the public testnet is going to be released. And I guess the final piece around the updates here is that the final round of audits has been booked. June 26th, which is Monday next week, is the official day on which we're supposed to kick those audits off. As we mentioned in the update, it's going to be Sigma Prime and Halborn that will be auditing V3. And again, maybe just a few words about these guys. Sigma Prime is both an auditing company, but also a software company. And on the software side, these guys are the developers of a popular ETH2 client called Lighthouse. So we feel really confident in their experience with staking architecture and the mechanics of proof of stake on Ethereum. So we're pretty certain that they will manage to apply this knowledge in assessing our product and trying to poke holes in it and find flaws and test its security. So in the end, we get a very thoroughly reviewed code. And then when it comes to Halborn, I believe these guys have a very strong reputation in the space for being very capable penetration testers. And yeah, it would be great to get their sign off on the security of our contracts when they provide that. Obviously, there's also an Immunify bounty that we will be launching once the audits are complete, but this is more of a story that we'll follow up on after the audits are actually done. But I guess it's just another testament to security being a priority here for V3. So that's roughly it for the updates on the V3 development. I think maybe, not to say this as a spoiler, but in general, just to make you guys aware, it's going to be a pretty heavy sort of decision-making period in the next couple of weeks, as in preparation for V3 release, we will need to decide on multiple things like liquidity, oracles, scoring system, and other stuff. So yeah, on our side, we will be driving participation in that with like as much communication as possible, but also would want to launch something of a testnet sort of participation campaign with the help of some of the tools available out there. Actually, like I mentioned before, Shoque here has made a wonderful suggestion on the StakeWise forums about utilizing Galaxy for the purposes of rewarding the loyalty of StakeWise users and perhaps incentivizing certain behavior like more deposits into the protocol. But as much as we want to use that on mainnet, we can even start using this earlier on testnet. So yeah, I guess I mentioned it before, but we can expect to have a program that drives more participation in testnets. We can thoroughly assess the performance of our product at scale. A few things maybe that we can touch on, and I would suggest that we turn this into an open discussion, since I believe many of the people here have read the proposals on the forum, is around the tokenomics. So it's actually like one of the things that people, just judging by Discord communication, request and care about the most, or care about deeply in connection to V3. So there have been some ideas floated on the forum around what can be done. Maybe for the sake of just everyone being on the same page, the kind of ideas that have been put forward are the following. Assume that you want to drive participation in StakeWise V3 and you want to drive more deposits. Some people have come up with the idea that you can get a top up to your staking yield as in form of SWISE. So assuming that you're getting something like 6% in ETH, you can possibly get like up to 1 or up to 2% in SWISE as a top up, which would be going only to people who provide liquidity for the SWISE ETH pair on Balancer, to the tune that their position is 5% of their staked position. So just to put it short, if you have 5% of your staked capital locked in the liquidity pool between SWISE and ETH, you are eligible for, let's say, a 1 or 2% boost to your staking position. That's to put it short. And yeah, I think this proposal has merit. I have my own thoughts on this, but just wondering if anybody who has seen the proposal had any initial sort of reactions to it. I think on the forum there haven't been too many conversations about this, but I've seen some discussion on Discord. What do you guys think, if anyone's willing to share their opinion? Alrighty. Well, I encourage you to take a look at it. If you're now behind your computer, then if you go on forum.stakewise.io, you should really find it in one of the most recent topics on the forum. So you can take a look and maybe comment on the website itself. But yeah, my personal take for this kind of tokenomics proposal, and again, this is just my personal opinion that does not really individually lead to anything, is that requiring people to provide liquidity for a volatile asset, which the governance token is, in order to boost their yield, is perhaps not necessarily, not 100%, but from some perspective is problematic if the goal is to drive sort of increased participation in the product by boosting the yield. What do I mean by this? If you're getting a yield boost, it's supposed to be coming on top of the existing sort of risk for you. Otherwise, the risk reward dynamic doesn't really change. The only way that something is made more attractive for people who want to, generate a certain return on their asset, like ETH, is to improve the return profile without significantly changing the risk profile. Otherwise, this risk reward dynamic, if it doesn't change, then perhaps any tokenomics change is fruitless. And so from this perspective, requiring people to provide liquidity in the SWISE ETH pair is kind of activity that is risky because of impermanent loss. So if we assume that this tokenomics is successful, or just StakeWise V3 in isolation is successful, and we have a positive appreciation in SWISE, or even in the case where for whatever reason there is negative performance in SWISE, then the people who provide liquidity would be affected by impermanent loss, which is typically supposed to be appropriately compensated. And it feels like the yield boost is essentially the compensation for IL, but it doesn't necessarily lead to, let's say, favoring StakeWise versus other protocols in like attracting deposits, because the risk reward dynamic doesn't really change in this with this kind of equation.
Can I just ask, sorry, the tokenomic model that you're discussing now, would it be necessary or mandatory to provide the liquidity and expose yourself to this impermanent loss, or would it be like optional for risk takers?
I think the way that the tokenomics was proposed is that this should be an optional thing. So, for example, if you are providing liquidity, then you are earning, this yield boost. And if you're not willing to go that far when it comes to using the product, then you can, perfectly avoid that. But my take on this is that, okay, that sounds very reasonable, but assuming our goal is to make sure that tokenomics drives more adoption of the protocol, and we know that perhaps the biggest effect on adoption comes from how far ahead your yield is compared to others, I question whether we would be pursuing the right goals here. I think we could get increased liquidity for SWISE this way, for sure, but whether this would, in isolation, improve the risk return dynamic for people who stake in the protocol and, let them, or rather, prompt them to use StakeWise over other protocols, I'm not so sure. And since this is the goal, I wonder whether this tokenomics proposal is sort of answering is following its own. All right. Well, again, I encourage everyone to take a look at it. You guys probably hold SwISE, so make sure to comment on that. I will comment on that myself as well, so that I also share my opinion on the forum. But yeah, this is one of the things that was out there for a while, and I was hoping to discuss that. Yeah, another thing that was put forward is actually by you, shoque, where you suggested that we can utilize Galaxy to drive participation in the protocol and give people incentives to stay staking with us. Like just how to put this, like at the foundational level, philosophically, fully agree with you. I've been working on the ambassador program, like we discussed with you as well, and basically can't wait to present it to the public and yeah, see how we can build on what you suggested for the purposes of improving engagement in the community. Will be cool to see.
Yeah, I think that perhaps Galaxy is a nice site to start with, but there are a couple of others which may be utilized as well in the future. I mean, it all depends on how the first campaign goes, and if it's really if it's really successful or not. But after that, there's also Guild and Layer 3 and Neely. There's actually a few which may be helpful. So let's just start with Galaxy, maybe to test the water, and then see if we can take it from there, and maybe see if it works for StakeWise. And this actually leads to another question that I have about V3, and the way you describe it and the way I see it developing. I kind of see the potential of it being a very good option for institutional use. And what are your predictions in terms of retail versus institutional use for V3? Will retail decline in terms of the composition, or well, you're obviously hoping to grow, but that is the main goal, but how will it affect the composition?
Yeah, well, good question, and obviously one that's difficult to answer in advance. I think just looking at the product features, our strongest suit is how flexible the whole system is to adjust to the needs of different participants. So, for example, if I'm someone that's deeply caring about, let's say, additional protection, and I don't want to go through the hassle of choosing a vault, I'm going to just get OSETH from the market, and I'm going to stake this way. So this is perhaps one of the main entry points into StakeWise V3 for retail users. If I am more sophisticated and I know a thing or two about staking, and I can find a vault that gives me a better return than OSETH, and I see that I'm not really trading off for a similar amount of risk than I'm getting in terms of a yield improvement, then I'm going to go with that vault. And especially since we can have compositions where like we can have vaults where solo stakers are running in DVT fashion, we can have communities launching their staking operations for either their existing users or people that come into their community. Since we can have DAOs and node operating companies launch their own products, we're kind of we're kind of passively bringing retail folks into StakeWise V3 by allowing others to sell their own staking service. So it's kind of like selling shovels when people are hunting for gold. And from this perspective, it will be interesting who will be the main users of these shovels, so to speak. And this is, the ability to launch a vault and start accepting deposits. It's true that, it's potentially fitting for institutional capital, but I wouldn't necessarily say that retail capital should be sort of, just going straight for OSETH. And this is for two reasons. One being that if you go with OSETH, you're kind of, you're likely to earn less. And while this is compensated by OSETH being over collateralized, you will probably be able to find vaults with DVT where sort of slashing risk is itself significantly reduced. So you would be able to get a higher yield in a vault without necessarily taking on more risk. So that's one thing. And then another thing is that for many people who join Ethereum proof of stake, let's put it this way, they are on a learning curve and they don't necessarily use the capabilities of liquid staking protocols for like borrowing or yield amplification or anything else from the get-go. They stake as long as it's simple and it's secure, and then for a while they just don't do anything with their stake capital. Or maybe they don't do anything at all over time. And what vaults allow you to do is, have all the security and simplicity that we have come to expect from StakeWise, but also at a reduced cost, unless you want to go to DeFi, which will incur an additional DAO fee. Until you mint a liquid staking token to like actually go and explore DeFi opportunities, you get all the same benefits of fractionalized staking, but at half the cost, paying only to the vault operator. And yeah, considering the fact that for some vault operators, it's perfectly possible to run like a low cost structure just on their infrastructure side. It will be a good deal for people looking to stake their ETH with security and also keep as much yield to themselves. So just based on these factors, I think retail is not necessarily excluded from this product, far from that. But it's true that the sort of flexible nature of the product can appeal, to institutions and to retail as well. Alrighty. So I don't think that I have anything else specifically on my agenda for this call. We have a couple of team members here on the call with me, so maybe you guys would like to say anything, or maybe there are some outstanding questions from the rest of the call participants. If so, we're happy to to take them and answer them.
Yeah, if I may ask one more question. So, as I understand it, you're kind of building a product now, which, like, it resembles, in my mind, going from retail to wholesale. So you're developing something that can be used by others in order to attract retail customers instead of just focusing on the retail yourself. Or maybe you're you're not focusing, but you're not disregarding retail, but you're more focusing on developing something that can be used also by others to attract their own crowd. Did I understand that correctly? Because I'm still not quite sure if I fully understand the capabilities and the idea behind the V3.
Yeah.
So more or less.
I think you can think about it this way. What has been missing in the market so far is the ability to plug your node into a liquid staking token, so that you don't have to go through any particular protocol in order to benefit or offer liquid staking. So it's kind of like, what do I compare it with? So assume you want to start selling razors, or you want to have a razor, and there is a format of what these razors look like and their function that is basically the optimum performance for you. Currently, this kind of stuff is different brands, and unless you go with this brand, you can't really get this kind of blade. But now you have just like this blade that you can attach to any stick, so to speak, and this can be used by anyone, including yourself. This is what StakeWise V3 enables. We have an LST that has a network effect that others can plug into. And just based on this capability, I think the market here is anyone who is running nodes either for themselves or the others. Naturally, these are both people who are institutional sort of capital, both people who are retail capital, but also people who provide services to others, not necessarily capital owners, but rather service providers. And yeah, from this perspective, StakeWise is kind of like this middleware where there is a marketplace where people come from both sides, both service providers and people looking for services. And there are also people who utilize the product as is because it solves their problems, where they are both the sort of service provider and the user. And if we think about StakeWise V3 in this fashion, then I believe it's clear that we kind of appeal to different use cases here, and it will be a matter of how effectively we're solving people's problems when we can decide on which type of users benefits best from our product. To me, it seems like the customizable component of V3 is very well fit for people with large amounts of capital that can benefit from this customizability, and potentially from not going with a standard solution like Lido, Rocket Pool, or StakeWise V2 today to get better terms. But also the byproduct of what these guys will be doing is a liquid staking token with slashing protection. And depending on how nodes are run by all these people, good APR. And this is a very sort of attractive product to retail users in general. So I think if we do one of these successfully, even just one of these, the other side will be drawn to it because of how incentives work out in the middle. So that's how I think about it personally.
I just wanted to jump in quickly. Like, I heard somebody the other day give the analogy of StakeWise V3 being kind of like an Airbnb platform, or comparing it to Airbnb, where StakeWise is obviously Airbnb, and you have people who have properties they want to rent out, i.e. validators they want to offer staking services on, and that can be anything from like a tent in a back garden to like a manor house, right? Like there's a whole range of people who could offer their services through this platform. And then you have the other side, obviously, where you have, anybody wants to come and see, what's an offer on the marketplace. So I think the Airbnb analogy is quite good. It is oversimplified though, because there's lots of, so for example, like the ability for solo stakers to come to StakeWise and mint a liquid staking token against their own node doesn't quite suit the Airbnb analogy, but I think at a high level, it's a fair way to, I think Kirill mentioned it, like where StakeWise becomes more like a middleware and a marketplace. I think that's quite a good analogy to use.
Hey guys, I want to jump in on this topic a little bit because it's I haven't quite wrapped my mind around it either. So this, if we use the Airbnb analogy, and we have a staking service over here that's providing ETH staking. In your Airbnb analogy, it would be the equivalent of Airbnb also offering their own places. So is V3, our node operators, are they competing directly with StakeWise in this, or in this scenario, are owners of homes competing directly with Airbnb at the same time? Help me out with that. I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think, it kind of comes back to what I was saying, where the Airbnb example is a little bit like oversimplified here. I don't see node operators competing, or anyone who launches a staking pool on this platform will not be competing with StakeWise per se. I don't see that. What is true is that one of the easiest ways for people to stake through this protocol is for people just to buy and hold OS ETH. Does that mean that that node operator is not benefiting from that? No, because there's a good chance actually that the node operator that's selling services directly through StakeWise actually has capital staked in it, which has OS ETH minted against it, and so that one operator actually forms part of the whole StakeWise ecosystem. And so I don't see it that, I wouldn't view it that StakeWise and the operators that build on StakeWise are competitors here. I think they're very much part of the same ecosystem. And just the ability and at the end of the day, it all depends on the type of user that comes to the platform. Do they want a really simple one-click staking option? Then they're just going to buy and hold OS ETH. But then there's going to be other users who will want a more advanced option and have the ability to select certain node operators or certain pools or vaults with various characteristics. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's like competition per se, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, in our scenario, we're going to be introducing people to StakeWise that may not have ever heard of it. So through our marketing, I mean, the only way we can justify offering ETH staking on top of what we want to do with LUKSO is to say, well, our community already trusts us, and if you have Ethereum you want to stake, you can stake it through our vault. And that's how they would be introduced to the StakeWise ecosystem. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And that's like a prime example where, StakeWise truly is the middleware here, which you guys are leveraging and able to offer to your users. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously a benefit for us as a platform that we have entities like yourself who are able to, attract TVL yourselves. It's not like us, it's not all StakeWise marketing that needs to happen to attract TVL here, but that's exactly how I view it. And obviously the benefit for you guys is that you guys get to offer, a service that you wouldn't have been able to do without our protocol. So I see it being very much, it's a good relationship for both sides, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So in Kirill, when he used the shovel analogy, we've got this whole other community over here, and we're saying, hey, we know where to get shovels. Let's go over there and talk to StakeWise. And we're bringing in our entire community, but we're getting a piece of the cut, almost like an affiliate cut, right?
Yeah, and that's a fair way to put it. And maybe I don't want to steal Kirill's analogy, so maybe Kirill can add to it. But I just want one thing to hear is that, remember the current design is that StakeWise will not charge at the vault level, and so for you guys as an entity who's looking to offer staking through StakeWise, it's like, well, there's no downside. There's pure upside in terms of economic upside, right? Like, we're not taking a cut from your revenues, and so for you, it's free. It's a free protocol to offer. And so, if anything, if you are going to work for any other protocol, then you're not going to be getting those revenues. So, I'm sure you'll be charged for it. So yeah, like, you get to use our platform for free, whilst benefiting from the infrastructure, basically. So, yeah, sorry, Gil, do you want to jump in? Given the shovel analogy is yours.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think you already answered it. I wouldn't be able to answer it any other way other than to say that it's possible that there is, there are different avenues for how people can benefit from bringing people over into StakeWise, whether this be through launching their own vault or being kind of like a referrer into some of the vaults. So definitely the vaults part where they're operated by someone that's not StakeWise and can benefit from receiving delegations from others is like a very good way to think about it. But yeah, we're discussing internally some proposals that could amplify this effect further.
Well, we love it. We love what you guys are doing. We support you. So, I'm sure you don't go 24 hours without hearing the word when. So I think you know what's coming next. Do you guys have any updates for us?
Yeah. So I think the commencement of audits kind of starts giving it away in terms of the timeline. So normally for a protocol like this, the audit period is 5 to 6 weeks, which is potentially, not necessarily, but potentially followed by a period where we correct certain things if there are any discoveries that are made. So this, I guess, kind of sheds light on the estimated launch date, or at least we would hope that we stick to it. There's, from a technical standpoint, today no indication that it should be any other way. But yeah, things can change. So let's just say that we're currently sticking to the idea that once the audits are complete, we're good to go.
Nice, love it. And do you guys see any major hurdles with moving all of, essentially being able to launch the LUKSO version very quickly since it's so close to ETH?
I think it would need to defer this to Dima.
Yeah. The question was like whether we can deploy quickly to LUKSO after mainnet release, right?
Yeah, basically. I mean, LUKSO is essentially is really just a copy paste of Ethereum with new standards.
Right. Well, I think like as long as there are no architecture changes we need to make for the deployment. The only problem is probably, I think, like the oracles, because for the Ethereum mainnet we are like carefully looking for the oracles to propose to the DAO. So I think we would need to do something similar for LUKSO. So I think that could be the kind of the challenging part to find oracles for the system. And also we have Gnosis, right? So Gnosis is approaching their what they doing. So they are preparing for the Shanghai. I think we would need to. Actually, no, it's not Shanghai. I think it's what's that, like, basically the fork when you can withdraw Ether. In their case, GNO. So we would need to prepare migration from V2 for V3 there as well. So I think, after the mainnet, that could be the first thing we'll look into, and maybe and try to estimate the roadmap for the next networks for us. But yeah, it's just that we didn't have time for now to look closer into LUKSO, how it works, whether we need to make some changes, and how simple would it be to launch for us there, because we are just overwhelmed with developing for the Ethereum.
Yeah, understood. And so if Chainlink integrated LUKSO, is that what you're saying? That would make that's going to be one of the bigger challenges because they haven't integrated yet, or I don't quite understand the challenges with the oracles.
Sure. So the oracles here are not the Chainlink oracles. Those are the ones because, as of now, every liquid staking protocol in Ethereum, they have a set of oracles that sync the balances of the validators from the consensus client and submit that value to the contract so that there is a correct exchange rate between, say, the Vault token and the how much ETH you get for one Vault token. So that part requires intermediate entity to sync that value and submit that to the contract. And the most common way of doing that up today is to have a set of oracles that do that, let's say, once per day or with a certain time delay. So that's something that every LSD requires right now on Ethereum and on Gnosis as well. That would be simplified or maybe improved when the beacon state route will become available on chain. That's something to be released, I think, next fork or in 2 forks. That set could be then removed, and that's something we are very looking forward to. But as of now, that's the case. So that's something we would need to solve here as well.
Gotcha. And Jordy is giving me he's telling me technical information on privately, telling me what oracles are. So, all right, I'm getting up to speed quickly.
All righty. Do we have anything else that we want to discuss? Okay, so it sounds like we're all done here. I think we covered a lot of ground in this conversation. And again, thank you all for joining. You will find the recording on YouTube in a day or two, as always. If you want a recap, I'll post about it in the announcements channel. But yeah, thank you again. We as a team can't wait to launch the public testnet and kickstart the marketing campaign for it. So yeah, we'll be doing just that. Thank you again, and until the next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.
Yeah.